Hello, YouTube, and welcome to episode 11 of Webflail, the podcast dedicated to uncovering the greatest failures behind the greatest webflowers. Because success often comes after learning from many failures. I'm your host, Jack Redley, a failure connoisseur, and today my guest is Kaela Williams, founder of B2B Studio, the studio that creates impactful brands and websites for business growth. It's an honor to have you here, Kaela.
Hi, it's so good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you for appreciating, the dilly-dally that I was doing with inviting you. There was a lot of change of dates, so thank you so much for coming. And at the end of the episode, we'll cover some of the questions that I got sent in on Twitter. But if anyone that's watching now wants to ask any questions during this live interview, then put them in the chat, and I'll pick them up as and when they come through, and we'll ask them during the interview. So, Kaela, you've had an amazingly busy week. I saw on Twitter that you have had, you're hiring a Webflow developer and all sorts. But before we talk about that stuff and where you are at now, can we just rewind the clock and talk a little bit about how you started, realizing you were a creative and how you got into Webflow?
Oh gosh, I guess I would have to go all the way back to high school, junior high, as far as when I started to become creative. I've always been a creative person, anything having to do with design or being creative in the kitchen. I love to cook, all that kind of stuff. Anything that's remotely creative. I'm not a painter or anything like that. But in terms of like digital creation or like food creation, I'm all about that. So I pretty much knew I was a creative from the time I was probably like 5. But so when I got to high school and college is when I really started to apply that. So I started off as a freelancer doing, work, one-off jobs like free Fiverr, Upwork, which is somewhat of a curse word now. I don't know why, but it's definitely like it kind of kick-started and jump-started me into learning how to deal with people and clients and all of those kinds of things. So I'm grateful for it. It got me through college somewhat. It definitely helped. But as I kind of came through to that, I wanted to kind of get outside of the freelancer. I knew I didn't want to stay a freelancer. I definitely had that end goal of building out an agency, which is what I'm doing now. And you saw in that tweet that it's definitely in overdrive right now. So as far as Webflow is concerned, I think I probably learned about it 2 to 3 years ago. But once I did, I was like, wait, what is this tool? It's a godsend. I can't believe this is even available because I was used to doing things on like Wix, and I don't know if anybody's heard of Yola, but we go all the way back for Yola. And then I never really got into WordPress. It just kind of confused me, and I didn't really kind of put that to the side. But I think when I saw Webflow, I was like, what are all these things that you can do? It's kind of allows you to really go in depth. So that was a long way around that. But yeah, that's how I kind of learned about Webflow and really just went into overdrive on that.
Wow. Okay, then. And now, for anyone that hasn't seen Kayla's tweet, she was interviewing for Webflow Dev this week and doing brand exploration and all sorts of other things. But I mean, obviously, you've got to a stage now where you're growing your agency, which is amazing. How would you summarize your journey so far?
Um, I would say it's been pretty up and down for sure. So when I was in that freelancer space, sometimes I still do kind of dip into that depending on, what client comes to me or where they find me. Sometimes I do kind of dip into that area. But as far as the journey, it's definitely been up and down. Some, in 2 years ago, I didn't know where my next client would come from. Sometimes, last year or even recently, you go through slow points sometimes, and that's sometimes to be expected. Definitely growing out of that, hopefully within the next year, and being able to consistently be able to kind of foresee work that's coming in for sure. And I'm definitely seeing that now, so that's awesome. But the journey has definitely not been a smooth one by any means, but I'm grateful for it, and it's just kind of growing me into the leader that I want to be in terms of BTB Studio and where we want to go for sure.
And just for anyone that's watching who doesn't know how old you are, how old are you?
I am 25.
25
Yeah.
years old, people. Growing ladies. We've had
Yeah,
another young.
sometimes I get mistaken for like 18, 19. I'm like, no, not quite that young, but yeah, for sure, I would still say I'm pretty young.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to see how you're growing. And when I saw that tweet, I was like, yes, Kaela, that's so cool. It's epic to see, how fast you're growing and what Webflow is doing for you, as it is for many, many other people who
Mhm.
are mastering the tool. So let's jump into your failures here, because I feel like the learnings from these failures are a large part of the reason why you are where you are today. Tell me about failure number one: not creating systems in your business.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, going back to that freelancer side of things, you kind of are used to just flying by the seat of your pants in a certain to a certain extent. You know, you don't really write anything down. You don't really kind of follow the same process or procedure going forward. So you kind of do things differently because you are learning and you are kind of figuring out what the best procedure is or best method is for that particular job. So once it just wasn't working for me in terms of not being able to go back to certain things that worked or not even remembering what you did that actually worked for that particular project. So I definitely learned that creating systems, writing everything down, making sure you're following processes or even just simple tasks the same way, just learning from those successful jobs and applying them to a system, you can be, easily able to pass that on to someone or even just follow it yourself as a freelancer if you're going to go down that road. I definitely learned that. Shout out to John Saunders. He definitely taught me in terms of creating those systems and just kind of making it a bit easier. So he just kind of laid it all out there with this course. I definitely encourage everybody to check it out. It's amazing. I probably wouldn't be growing as quickly as I am if it wasn't for that course. So for sure, shout out to that. But yeah, I would say that's definitely something that I learned for sure as a failure or a lesson.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people kind of jump straight into Webflow and
Mhm.
they're like, whoa, I can build stuff. Okay, let's try and get someone to pay me to build stuff. Um, what if you were to look back in hindsight now, say you were that freelancer or someone that just came across Webflow as a platform, how did you even work out what your processes were? And at what point did you land on the process being like, okay, now I need to write this down because this is my process? Do you see what I'm?
Yeah, for sure. So with Webflow, that definitely was the last thing to actually create a system for because it is so in depth at the beginning, you're just really trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure out how do I do certain things before you even create a system because you have to figure out how to actually do it. So after you kind of go through Webflow University, all of those things that are available out there to learn, you just kind of figure out this is how I should build this or what I should do. And that also came from actually studying a lot of Webflow templates that they released on the site, as well as clonables, how people are building things, what the best way to build it is. And then once client first came around, I was like, oh, this seems like a system in a way where you can kind of make sure that that same structure is applied to every project. And it definitely helped in terms of that going back to those systems because before you would just kind of build it the best way that you knew how. But once that came around, it kind of systematically allowed me to build the projects the same way and with the same quality and with the same structure and not allow another developer to come in and easily take it over for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So what you're saying is learn Webflow really, really well, and then try and focus on process
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
you're good. Because I think that's sometimes where the conflict is when you're learning the platform, but you're doing client work, but you're learning the platform, and it's kind of, and to some extent you are learning every single project. The platform
Mhm.
better and better. But I think sometimes people jump straight into like selling Webflow because
Yeah.
they've kind of just started. But what you're saying is learn it really well, try and work out what your processes should be, and follow some kind of system like client first and then think about getting clients? Have I
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's hard. It's going to be hard to do all three of those things at the same time. If you have a client that needs work from you and you're also learning at the same time, it is difficult to create those systems. So either kind of learn it well and make sure you can apply those learnings to a client, job, or try to create the system first. Maybe you look at other projects and some other people, how they're building things. You can write that down and then apply it to the next client. So it can kind of work both ways, but generally I would prefer to kind of learn it first and then create that process for how you build.
And for anyone that's watching now that's like, I'm just starting out with Webflow. I mean, I'm watching Webflow University, but what other resources are out there, paid and not paid? I mean, you mentioned John D. Saunders' course, which I haven't done, but I've heard good things about it. Do you have any other like resources or anything that you would like recommend? Maybe someone that's watching now who's learning Webflow.
I would actually say the best way to learn is just kind of jump right in and create something, because like you mentioned before, the templates and the clonables that I've been releasing, that they were a way for me to kind of really go in depth and learn what I can do. And that also allows future clients to see and say, oh, look at that work, that's great. Even though it's not particularly a client project, you can model it around a client project that you would want. So I think one of the best ways to learn is just kind of jump in, go right ahead and jump in, and come up with an idea, or maybe just take a look at a project that you would like, and then just go forward. I see a comment that talks about Paid Pro, Flex Academy. I didn't take Flex Academy, but I've heard great things, so you might want to jump into that. But one of the best ways for me to learn is jump right in and just kind of break things and figure it out.
That's a really, really good advice. And yeah, I would second Philip's comment there about the Flux Academy. I've actually got done Flux Academy and Paid Pro's course. So that I recommend them both a lot for not just building Webflow, but also the SEO side, which is Pate's one. So one thing that I wanted to ask you about in regards to learning Webflow is that you have got templates. You seem to have kind of done a lot of your learning by making templates at the start of your Webflow career. Do you recommend that for people that are starting out, to just make stuff? Maybe they haven't necessarily got the inbound client requests. What do you think about templates? Should you do them? Should you not? Is it a waste of time? What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's one of the top factors of why we're starting to grow as a studio the way that we are, because of the templates that I just wanted to create a project that I would actually want in a client. So if I can think of that and say, this would be the kind of client that I would want, so this is the project that I should create in terms of like a fake project or whatever. So you do the same kind of research. You take a look, say for instance, if it's an education project, you would take a look at other education websites, maybe go on Lap Ninja, something like landbook.com, study a few other educational websites, take that into account, see how they phrase things, see what their copy looks like, and take that information and apply it to a fake project. And someone who is an actual educational client will come in and say, oh, this is exactly the kind of work that we need. So templates are a huge factor. I would encourage anyone to do them anytime that you can find to create something. It doesn't have to be a huge project. But just kind of try it out. See if you can do a 1-page website, 2-page, something that just speaks to your ability and speaks to the quality of your work, and just go on with that. And then the more that you publish, the more people that see that on your Webflow profile, they'll, click that hire me button. And that's kind of what happened to me.
Yeah, and I would also say that a lot of people that are cloning the project, once you've put a template out there, might not necessarily know Webflow very well. That's why they're buying the template. And then they realize, oh, actually, this is kind of hard. So why don't I just reach out to the person that made the template to help me, do the editing of this, or, set up something longer term, like a subscription-based model. Please, can you continuously update this? So
Yeah.
I think templates is such a good way to start out. And in terms of now you've established yourself and you've got more and more client work coming in, do you still think it's worth like making templates, or was that something that was kind of like an engine at the start for you to get clients?
It's actually something I enjoy. So it's not something that I would just completely give up because I do love creating things for the community and having that available. Because you can have someone, a freelancer, who sees your template and they have a client that needs something like that, and they use that template, they customize it if the client agrees to that kind of thing. And that's helping them on their journey to kind of grow. So I definitely wouldn't want to stop because I do have client work coming in, and it's starting to get a little busy. I haven't been able to do as many templates as I want, or any really, but I definitely want to get back to that once things kind of settle down. But yeah, for sure, I think it's a great thing to do for the community, so I wouldn't want to give that up for sure.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, that it's not just about getting clients, it's also
Yeah.
the community aspect of making templates and clonables.
Hmm.
Can I just circle back to you making systems in your business? So for someone that's starting out, they know Webflow kind of well, they've got clients. How did you actually make systems, as it were? Like, did you go to Notion and did you write everything down? Did you record videos? How did you actually, because I think a lot of people say you got to have systems in your business, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. How did you actually approach that?
Yeah, well, for sure. So when I first started out, before I had even taken any courses or anything like that, I used to just write everything in a plain Apple Notes app. I'm just doing like a one, two, three. This is what I did. This is what I did. This is what I did after a project, or even as I'm doing the project, paying attention to what I'm doing and writing it down. It's really informal. Probably took me like a few minutes. But as I began to grow, that the notes really wasn't a solution. So I did kind of move over to Notion, which actually, is a little bit more systematic. You can kind of build it into your project management and all of these other tools. So basically, what I just did is, as you're doing an actual job, so say for instance, you have a lead that comes in, and there's a specific process that you follow. You send a questionnaire, or you send a schedule link for through Calendly or something like that, just to kind of get the job going. What you would do after that, or even during that, is just take those steps, one, two, three, and then just quickly write them down in a Notion page or in your notes if you're just starting out. And that's how I usually go about it. Some others, like John Saunders, recommends recording yourself in a Loom. That takes a bit of time for me that I really don't want to give right now because of everything I have to do. But that is a great um, call out to kind of record yourself doing it, and then you'll be able to go back and write those things down so you don't forget a step. But for sure, if you can remember everything, definitely write it down. But that's how I would go about it for sure.
Yeah. And I would also say that there's kind of different systems that you need in your business as you grow. Like, you might have systems for email. So you might have like email templates that you realize you keep sending and you're like, okay, this is really stupid. I'm going to make a
Yeah.
system for the email. Then you might
Yeah,
have like,
that was the first thing I did actually, was the
okay,
email template.
I think
Yeah,
that's the
because
easiest
once
one to
yeah,
start
you
with, isn't
start
it?
just repeating yourself after, like,
Yeah.
I'm saying the same thing and it's taking me 20 minutes to write this email every time. Why am I not templating this out, copying it somewhere, and then just filling out the links as need be? That was actually the first thing I did, and it saved so much time now not to have to write those emails out.
Yeah. And then you might be like, okay, it would be really helpful if I had systems for my actual process, from the client onboarding to the actual delivery of the work to the launch of the website. To, you might have a system for your referral scheme. So there's like, I think that's another thing to say as well when you have systems in your freelancer or your agency. I've worked for Crafted Studios, so shout out to Dexter,
Yeah, they're
Washington.
awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome work.
they do. Yeah, they do really beautiful work. But they use Notion and they write down have a separate page on Notion for each of these different parts that make up the whole agency system. So
Yeah,
I think that's also worth saying, whether you use Notion or whether you use something else or whether you use Loom, just making sure that you have kind of clear systems within the overarching
yeah. I think there's a tool too. I can't remember the name escaped me right now, but there is a tool that you can actually click record and actually do the job, and it will actually write it out for you. I wish I could remember it right now.
Ooh, that
Um,
sounds helpful.
yeah, it's a great tool. I wish I could remember it, but you might be able to Google something like automatic SOP creator or automatic systems. I can't really remember, but I haven't used it yet, but it sounds really promising. And shout out to Opsys too. I actually got into that a little bit ago. By the future, they just released a system to help agencies kind of, have everything in one place. So I would definitely recommend. I'm actually setting that up now and getting into it. It does have a place where you can, store procedures and templates and all that stuff. So I would definitely recommend people who are watching to dig into that.
Okay, awesome. I'll put that in the chat when I find it. So tell me about failure number 2 here. We've got letting imposter syndrome get in the way of opportunities. I feel like anyone watching is probably resonating with
Oh
this. Tell
gosh,
us
the
about
big one.
it.
The big one. Yeah, I would say it's something that you continue to struggle with throughout this entire process. It never really it sometimes it gets better. I can definitely say that as you grow, but it always seems to kind of rear its ugly head sometimes. So I would definitely say, as you mentioned, obviously I'm young. I'm a woman. I'm also African American. So those all three of those things kind of make it seem like sometimes where you're not where you should be, or you're not where you're supposed to be, or you're not as good as the next designer or agency owner. But those kind of that can cause those imposter syndrome symptoms to kind of come up. But I've learned to kind of trust in yourself as well as trusting in your skill. And I'm also a big person on faith, so that also helps as well. Just kind of uplifting, uplifting me, bringing me to a spot where you can say, okay, you can do this. This is, you're better than you think you are. So those are the kinds of things that help as far as imposter syndrome. Yeah, Philip says still has imposter syndrome at 40. I hope it gets better, but I'm definitely encouraged that as you kind of grow and learn and practice makes perfect, it starts to be rare to experience imposter syndrome. But I definitely say it doesn't completely go away for sure.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about kind of the systems that you have to cope. I mean, you talked a little bit about faith there. Um, I mean, say you're having a bad day, someone on Twitter or social media is talking about how amazing their business is going, and maybe
Mhm.
yours isn't, and you're feeling a little low, and you see that kind of a message. What do you do to kind of navigate imposter syndrome? Do you just, delete social media for a day? Do you read some affirmations? What do you do to actually deal with that?
Well, the first thing I learned to do was, instead of seeing someone else doing better than my first reaction is to congratulate them or support them on their journey. So it's not a race to the finish. It's more so we're all coming through this together, especially on our journey. Some people may be further ahead than you, and that's perfectly okay. So that's usually my first reaction, and that kind of tempers down that imposter syndrome a bit. And then my next step is to say, okay, that's not where I am right now, but how can I get there? Right. So anything that I need to do, I need to take another course? Do I need to learn from a mentor? Do I need to practice it a little bit more? Do I need to post on social media a little bit more to get a little bit more traction? So I think those are the things that I do to kind of navigate through that. And then obviously faith, you just send a prayer up and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? So those are the kinds of things that I, would definitely encourage everyone to do. Some people have their own ways of managing it, but I would say those are mine for sure.
Yeah, I love what you say about turning kind of jealousy into a form of kind of positive energy with congratulating
Yeah.
people. I think it's sometimes hard when you see someone at the same level as you talking about, how much they're earning or whatever it is. But
Hmm.
I actually think realizing that, a win for an individual in the Webflow community is actually a win for every single person that does
Yeah.
Webflow, because Webflow is kind of at very early stages in the grand scheme of web development. So I think when I see someone talk about their Webflow projects and how busy they are and stuff, it genuinely is a hugely positive thing for you too, as
Hmm.
someone that uses Webflow. So I really like to, I think this idea of congratulating them, but maybe also congratulating yourself when you see someone else who's doing really well, because you're on the right track, as it were, if you're looking to get clients, and other people are getting clients from using Webflow. So
Yeah, and fully understand that you don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes from that person. So they might be struggling with certain things or certain similar things, that they just had a win before you did, and that's okay. But you don't really see everything that they're struggling with or having stress about. So that's another thing that you kind of think about to, say that we're all in this together.
yeah, definitely. And sometimes actually the highest paying clients are the most difficult to deal with, and
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, for sure.
just sometimes. So that's the other thing as well, the kind of experience that individual might be having is not necessarily always positive. And I think everyone's metric for success differs, but I'd like
Hmm.
to think that having a relatively stress-free client experience would be every Webflower's dream.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
Absolutely, and we've all got the
Absolutely.
easiest clients currently, obviously. Um,
Mhm.
I'm really glad though that you have real advice to get over imposter syndrome, though, because I think a lot of the time people say, oh, imposter syndrome is really crippling and things, but actually kind of what are the real ways of, or real methods to get over that, and not talked about often enough. So I'm really glad that you can share that with us today. So one part of imposter syndrome is letting imposter syndrome getting in the way of opportunities. And I think that's an interesting part of imposter syndrome, where you see everyone that's applying for a competition
Mhm.
that you want to apply for, and you're like, what's the point?
Yeah.
What So you talk about imposter syndrome getting in the way of opportunities. How do you just get that out of your head, and you're just like, I'm just going to do this anyway. Like, I'm just going to apply anyway for a competition, for example, or I'm going to put in that application for a client that I really want to get. How do you kind of just go ahead and do it anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely imposter syndrome can get in the way of going after things for sure. So if you do kind of let it overtake you and you have an opportunity that comes along, like a client that comes along, it's a huge project and there's all of these things to do. And you know that some of those things you don't have experience in or you might not be the best at, but it's kind of not based in reality because you know you can figure it out, you can do it. I wouldn't recommend taking a project though that you know nothing about and don't do, so that will be just a nightmare. But if you do, or you have some idea about it, just kind of temper that down in the back of your head and say, I can do this, I can take this project. I'm not going to let imposter syndrome stop me from this opportunity that could, skyrocket my career. So that's one thing that can happen. But if it does, just kind of go after it. Just kind of like today, with this with this interview, I was like, imposter syndrome kicks in. Is like, wait, why do you want to talk to me? I'm just starting like 2 years ago, starting to build this agency. What, like, I'm still in the growth stage. Like, why am I here? So those kinds of things can kind of say, okay, yeah, you kind of know what you're doing. You're doing pretty well. Go after that opportunity. I'm a big fan of saying yes to things now, or as I used to say, oh gosh, no, I can't do that, or I'm not equipped for that. I actually recommend your first response to being yes. And then if something happens down the road, that's fine. You can kind of pivot, but I'm a fan of being a yes person. So I'll say yes.
And I definitely think, though, that sometimes you have that kind of sense of fear.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Kaela, but when that sense of fear comes in, sometimes that's a sign that you should go towards that fear,
Hmm.
because you're not going to overcome those fears unless you do, to a certain extent. Like the first time you get in the sea, like as a kid, and there's waves and you're like, oh my God, this is the scariest thing ever. And then you get in and you realize that it's actually really fun. But you wouldn't have, even kind of had that experience unless you felt
Yeah.
the fear and just said, okay, I'm just going to go for it anyway. So I think sometimes the fear is, and that maybe anxiety that comes with imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
is actually a sign that you should just do it. You should just go
Yeah.
for it,
For
because
sure.
that may be something that's going to push you outside your comfort zone, but your comfort zone is going to get bigger as a result. And, that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, there's no growth without going outside of your comfort zone. If you're always in your comfort zone, then there's an issue. I mean, you should probably try to seek out opportunities where you can grow and get out of that. It just opens up a whole new world when you don't let imposter syndrome kind of keep you back.
Yeah. God, I feel like this is design therapy. I'm
For
I
sure.
need
Yeah.
I needed this today as much as hopefully whoever's watching is getting value out of this. Yeah, it's I think, depending on, regardless of whatever stage you're at, as Philip says, he says he's 40 and he still has imposter syndrome. It sounds like this is an ongoing thing. So, I'm really glad that we're talking about this today. But let's move on to failure number 3: not building balance into my week. Being a workaholic and perfectionist. Talk to me about that.
Oh gosh, I feel like all 3 of these are connected in some way, and they kind of link back to the last one. So, like, not building balance into my week. So I'm definitely a recovering workaholic. You can ask my parents, you can ask my friend, you can ask anyone that I know. That's always what I'm doing most of the time. I'm trying to go forward. So I would say not building into balance into my week links back to that imposter syndrome just a little bit, because if you feel like you're not doing enough or as the next person, then you might overcompensate for that and do entirely too much and take on too much and stress yourself out. So there is balance to that. You do want to grow. That's completely fine. Sometimes you may have to kind of grind it out for a day, but if it's becoming a pattern, right? If it's not something that you can kind of control, which is what sometimes I do struggle with, is not being able to control it if I'm kind of in the grind, not being able to set it down, take a break. A lot of times I forget to eat or I don't eat because I don't have time. So I would say that really kind of they all link together in a way. And it's something that I'm learning and constantly learning. I think I'm getting better. I have made sure that on the weekends I don't touch any work. A lot of times I don't pick up emails unless it's something really urgent. A lot of times it's not, so I'll just say it can wait to Monday. So Saturday, Sunday is completely, just rest, thinking. But while I am resting, I'm probably thinking about what I have to do that next week and my to-do list, which is what I'm still working on. But just kind of taking time for yourself, making sure you can build balance. Having a stop has really worked for me. So I don't usually work past 3 or 4. When that time comes, I kind of put it down and say, I'm done. Unless it's something that's really pressing or I have a deadline. Usually that's not the case, but just working those kind of balances into your week, I think really helps about, with that workaholic syndrome.
So having clear boundaries,
Yeah.
when you work and when you don't work. I think that's been exacerbated during lockdown because, you're probably in your bedroom or, at home,
Yeah.
and that's the space which you relax as well. And that kind of, there's blurred lines between when you work and when you don't as a result. Um, do you also have like a space that you work in, and that is exclusively like the space that you work in, or is it just the kind of time boundaries that you set?
Well, I don't have a space boundary just yet. I am still in my bedroom slash office. So hopefully, one day I can have that separate office that's just completely dedicated to work. Um, but that's a little down the road. But right now, it's just particularly time boundaries, letting clients know when you're working and when you won't be able to respond, not immediately responding to every message that comes in. With those emails, sometimes it can be tempting to respond right then and there. I've learned it can wait. You can set it down, or you can set a block of time to where you'll check those emails. So, generally, I do kind of check them throughout the day, but I may not respond to them, or I'll just kind of say, oh, okay, that's what I need to kind of think about, but I won't actually respond just yet. And then that can also avoid a lot of mishaps in communication if things are translated wrong. So all of those things kind of build into balance for me, and I'm learning to get better at that, and not just make my whole entire life about work. So that's definitely something that I haven't fully mastered yet, but I'm getting there for sure.
I found that the letting your clients know that you won't reply explicitly by saying like, I don't work past 5, so I'm not going to reply
Yeah,
past 5, um, does two things. One, it makes them, realize that they can't just trample all over you, and you are setting clear boundaries. But I think the other thing is that it makes them aware that you have other clients other than them.
hmm,
Because I think sometimes clients just think, okay, you're basically an employee now, so respond to
yeah,
me like you're on the company Slack or whatever it is. And it's just not fair
hmm,
on you as a freelancer when you're dealing with other clients if you're treated like that by, 3 or 4 different groups of people. So I have, yeah, 100% second that, making sure that you set clear boundaries for yourself, but also tell the client that you have these boundaries in place,
yeah.
because it's so important for your mental health.
Yeah, it's actually something you can build into paperwork, like when it comes to your contract, your agreements, proposals, you can set that ahead of time so they know this is when you reach out to them. And then, setting up their client dashboard or wherever they go to check anything, you can have that there so they can see when you're available and when you're not available. So all of those things help for a partnership because you're not hiring me as an employee, I'm a partner to your company. So all of those things definitely help with balance for sure.
Yeah, you've gotta be a collaborator in the project. You're not just busting out the work with as an employee.
Yeah.
So yeah, really, really important to set that balance. And so how has this, say someone that's watching now is working 80-hour weeks and is feeling burnt out, and they really, really need to work out what balance actually looks like and how good it feels to have balance in their life. Because maybe I don't know if you've had this, but sometimes when you feel burnt out, you don't actually realize that you're burnt out until
Mhm.
it's too late. And in hindsight, you're looking back like, whoa, my mental health was not good, and I was working way too much. Um,
Mhm.
what does balance look like for you now, and how much better do you feel having got that balance in your life?
I think it feels amazing because I am still in the middle of that as far as creating balance. Because, like I said, this past week, I'm looking into interviewing developers and kind of bring people on to offset that. If you're feeling burnt out, then that means it's either a time to hire or it's either a time to increase your prices or, bring on some extra people to help you out. That's a great sign that it might be time to start building an agency versus doing it all yourself. And there's a time period where you'll say, okay, these projects are mine, and these projects I can kind of collaborate with some other people on to help me out. So if you're in 80-hour weeks, there's an issue. If it is financially centered and you're doing that because you have bills to pay, totally understand that. There are ways to circumvent that if you are getting that much business where you're working that long, then it might help to look into some people to help you. But in terms of where I am right now, that's what I'm doing right now is kind of offsetting the work that I have to do. as far as development and bringing people on to do branding. And you can actually say, this is my favorite part. So if your favorite part is, doing the design in Figma, so keep that part, do that for yourself. Is that where you find joy? So keep that part, and the parts that you're not so great at or you don't really want to do, kind of find some people who can help you or collaborate with you, join your team, all of that good stuff definitely helps.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're getting loads and loads of requests for work, then and you're working 80-hour weeks, like Kayla says, putting up your prices makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you can probably get rid of some quite difficult clients as well as working less for the same amount of money.
Yep.
So let's get into the quickfire community questions. We have finished going through your failures and amazing learnings there, but I've got a few questions from the community to ask you.
Excited.
Quickfire being, you don't need to be like, there's no buzzer or timer or anything, but if
Hmm.
your answers a little bit short, because we've got a few to go through. I'll obviously,
Cool.
yeah, how long you go for. But anyway, so what are the best tips for hiring a Webflow dev?
Oh man. So first and foremost, definitely take a look at their read-only links. If they have a couple projects, ask to see that. You can immediately see how they build, what kind of process they use, interactions, all that stuff. The quality of their work, that shows a lot. And then secondly, see what their availability looks like. Make sure that they're not too busy or pressed because your project may not be at the top of their list. So that might be something if you're working with a contractor. But yeah, that would be my quick answer is take a look at those read-onlys.
Great. And have you found a Webflow dev, by the way?
Yes, I have.
Hey,
I was actually meaning to tweet that out the other day, but yes, we have found someone really great. I'm very hopeful for him to start out on the first project, but yeah, I'm excited.
hey, congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Um, Someone asked a question about copywriting. Do you charge extra for that? Should you charge extra for that, and why?
Yes, so for BTB Studio, we do add that in as an added extra cost. But what we do is when we offer clients, we actually build out a quote with three different options. I've learned that it's better and easier for them to convert if they see three separate options rather than just one, because that one option might put them off. But in terms of copywriting, that's usually an added cost to say, because I usually do have to bring someone in to do that copywriting. I'm not a writer. I don't profess to be the best kind of writer. So we definitely need that to work with them on their copy and kind of flesh that out with someone. And then, yeah, so you just add that in as an added cost, or you might work with their copywriter. You don't have to build that in. So, yeah, for sure.
And question from Philip Trott here. Where did you find your first dev, and where did you find your copywriter? Where do you find freelancers to collaborate with?
So two areas have proven the best for me. So one, there's really great Webflow developers on Upwork, and there's ways to collaborate with them. So I would definitely check that out. You just have to make sure your job description is really fleshed out and really detailed for exactly the kind of person that you're looking to work with. So they make sure they fit your culture of whatever business you have. And then just making sure you speak to them like on a video call instead of just doing a regular message. So you can meet them face to face, you can see what they're about. And I wouldn't recommend just hitting the hire button and not really kind of going through that process. And then secondly, doing like a private interview link. So if you find someone that you see has really good work, maybe they're on Twitter or Facebook, you can actually DM them like if they would be willing to work with you on a team situation or maybe just a contractor situation. And they would be willing to kind of fill out your information or form. We put together a quick Google form that they kind of fill out so you can see everything that we want to make sure that we evaluate the quality of their work. But yeah, those are the two ways that I've been going about hiring a dev.
Great. And I would also say that, on Twitter, DMs, it's amazing how, as Kaela just said, you might just get a message from someone being like, hey, I love your work. Would you be interested in potentially collaborating? Can we get on a call?
Yeah.
And that means that you don't necessarily need to pay for an ad on a job board. And I've also heard a lot of agency owners talk about getting inundated with just like hundreds of applications that they've got to go through,
Yeah.
some of which are just a complete waste of time. And clearly the person hasn't really thought about, what the culture is of the agency and things like that. So DMing people, as simple as that, sounds like what you and other agency owners I've heard do.
Yeah, for sure.
What is the top skill you feel is undervalued for Webflowers?
Oh man, I would definitely say, I guess it would be undervalued as far as organization is concerned because not everyone builds the same way. So I would say it's definitely undervalued, going into all of the projects that I've looked at when people have sent me read only links. That's one of the first things I actually look for. And there's a lot of people who don't look for that, which is surprising because it does have a lot to do with the future. If someone were to take on that project or if you need to collaborate with someone else, if it's not built in the cleanest way. It doesn't have to be client first, but it just kind of has to be a clean build. So I definitely say that would be undervalued for sure. That's not something that everybody thinks about when they're hiring a dev. They just take a look to see if it looks good on, live, but they don't really look behind the
Curtain.
veil.
Yeah, that makes sense. The organization. Actually, Corey Moen, who is the senior designer at Webflow, said exactly the same thing as you, Kaela. So you are,
Yeah.
you're in good hands.
He's awesome, by the way.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy. But yeah, the organization aspect of being a Webflow, he talked about as well. What does success look like to you? This is a really interesting question.
Oh man, there's so many ways I could go about answering that question because a lot of times when you hear the word success, you immediately think money, which is, it can be hard to kind of drift back to that thought because success a lot of times is measured by the end of the year and what your revenue looks like. But I'm also learning to think of it as internally, like, am I happy? Does my life feel like I have balance? Am I able to do the things that I want to do in terms of freedom is concerned, or am I locked to this client that I can't seem to get rid of because it's just been a nightmare? So those kinds of things, I think, all kind of weigh into success, and that comes from having really great people around you, really great clients around you, and also really great systems around you. So I think all of those things kind of, building to success for sure.
Great answer. And are there any clients that you particularly want and any clients that you particularly don't want?
Oh man, I haven't really set for myself like a limit. I've been pretty open to all kinds of clients. I would say one I may not want. Hmm. I really don't think there is one, to be honest. There's so many different I'm so interested in so many different industries. There's so many projects that I would be happy to take on. So I actually don't think there's one that I would say I absolutely don't want. Maybe something that has really technical requirements, like building a web app. Maybe that's not really something that we're interested in doing right now. So I would say if I could think of one. And then one that I want specifically, I'm definitely interested in that startup situation. So it's definitely interesting to me. So that would probably be the next client that I would love to have is like a well-funded startup or something that's really impactful and changes the way people go about life for sure.
What's the skill you wish you had mastered but haven't yet?
I would definitely say, I would definitely say Photoshop and Illustrator for sure, because I was never one to use those tools. It overwhelmed me, it stressed me out. I definitely can get in there and do a few things, but I'm definitely not a master at it at any means. I still sometimes have to YouTube stuff, look up Adobe videos to do something pretty basic. So that's something I wish I would have invested more time into, because it's something that really transfers to websites really well if you have those skills in illustration and really custom and photo editing, things like that. So that's someone that I might be willing to hire so I don't have to do that. But that's something that I wish I had a stronger skill in.
Hey, if anyone's watching and knows Adobe really well, hey, this
For
is your
sure.
chance.
I might be willing to talk to you.
Yeah. And so, what's the favorite tool that you're currently using?
Oh man, if I say Webflow, is that just really obvious?
I put you on
Um,
the spot. Let's try a different one.
yeah.
Let's try a different one.
Yeah, so obviously Webflow, but if I have to pick another, it would definitely be Octopus, I believe. It's what it is like an information architecture tool to build out sitemaps. You can actually visually build out information. It lets you do like different layouts and kind of think out your process when you're building out wireframes and stuff like that. So it's been one of my favorite tools. And then obviously Figma, like what can't you do in Figma? So but if I had to pick one that everybody may not know about, it would for sure be Octopus.
And with
Octopus.do if people want to take a look at that.
let's put that in the chat. With Adobe looking to acquire Figma, I guess Octopus might
Yeah,
be more and more
that's
in
kind
demand.
of the worst news I heard this today.
Yep.
Is
I
Adobe
agree.
acquiring Figma. Yeah, I'm not a fan of. I'm just not a fan of their pricing structure and all of that. So I was disappointed, but hopefully they don't ruin it.
And what one piece of advice would you give a Webflow freelancer starting out?
Oh man, I would say definitely get into Webflow, start breaking things, start learning, start with Webflow University first and foremost if you want to, really strengthen your skills for sure. And then also be active in community. You can learn so much from people like on Twitter. I don't really get on Facebook too much, but I think there was a Webflow group up there you can get into. But for Twitter, it's been amazing for me learning from people and in their journey. So those are the two things I would say to get started for sure. And build clonables for sure. That can put your name out there. People can see your work. So those would be the top three things for sure to start.
Agreed. And I would just add, I know these are quick fire questions, but one thing that came to mind as you were saying that was that asking people that are ahead of you or that have a skill set that you want, just asking them for a coffee and just saying, hey, can I just take half an hour of your time and just talk to you a little bit about how you got to where you are? That has really accelerated my Webflow journey. And yeah, like Kaela says, being on Twitter or Facebook to do that, are really, really good places to start. But people are
Yeah.
generally way more willing to give you advice than you might think. You might be like, oh, this guy's not going to give me the time of day, or oh, this girl's like managing her own agency. She's not going to spend half an hour with me. Well, actually, everyone's
Mhm.
come from somewhere to get to where they are, and
Yeah.
they're probably more than willing to chat to you. So I would really, really recommend you doing that. Once a week, reach out to someone that you want to be more like. I think it's
Yeah,
pretty
for
reasonable.
sure.
So before I ask you the final question, where can people find you, Kaela?
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Kayla Brook W. That's I believe it's a Brook with three O's, unless I've changed it and I can't remember. If you have it in the notes, definitely you can find me there. And then you can also find me if you want on Instagram at the same. I believe it's at Kayla Brook. If I totally butchered this, I'm sorry. It will be in the description. Sometimes I get confused by which one is which, but I think it's at Kaela Brook on Kaela Brook W on Instagram and on Twitter, if I have that correct. So those are the two places you can find me, and then you can also, if you want to hop in my DMs, we can talk about starting an agency and how that kind of goes about. I'm definitely happy to chat.
Awesome stuff, Kaela. Thanks so much for offering your advice to anyone that's DMing you.
Yeah, for sure.
So the final question is possibly the hardest one you've had so far. Are you ready?
Oh, okay.
What is your next failure going to be?
Oh, that's such a good question. Hmm. I would definitely say if I don't improve the third one, which is being a workaholic, that would be my next one, is kind of burning out and just like completely removing myself from this whole thing, just deactivating Twitter, deactivating Facebook, all of this stuff. And I'm just going to go on sabbatical and go on a beach somewhere. That would be, that might not be a failure, but that might be something that I would have to do if I don't kind of get this together. But yeah, I guess that would be the only thing I can think of as an next failure, for sure. Well, also building an agency, going through this particular process, there's definitely a lot of potential failures I can go through of hiring the wrong person or not having the right, work, or having an unhappy client because of somebody I hired. Those are failures that I don't want, but I'm ready for. So I guess that would be something that I haven't already mentioned today.
Well, I would say that you are well on the way to making a stunning agency. You are, putting yourself out there, learning as you go, but it sounds like you're already making a big leap to avoiding burnout by hiring people. So let's hope that
Yeah,
failure doesn't
for sure.
happen. But if it does, we'd love you back on the show. We can talk about failures and learnings
Yeah, 3 new
anytime.
failures. Agency failures. We
3 new failures every week. No, I'm joking.
Oh gosh.
You're doing amazingly. And if anyone else has any other questions, please do ask them as we wrap this up. I'd just like to say, if you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, this interview is going to be sent out next Tuesday. So if you're catching this at the end, I see some people watching live catching this in the last few minutes, then it's going to be sent out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts in the newsletter. So definitely subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't already. There's also Webflow jobs in there. There's 3 Webflow inspirational websites, and there is also a weekly article. So definitely subscribe if you're interested. Do you have any last advice for anyone watching, Kaela?
Yeah, definitely. I know we talked a lot about imposter syndrome, so I know there's a lot of people struggling out there. Definitely don't get too in your head, go after it. Just set those goals, try to hit them. If you don't, try it again. So I would say that would be my last advice for people watching, for sure. And go subscribe to Webflail.
Thank you, Kaela. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I completely agree. Keep trucking, guys. You're doing way better than you think. Sometimes we get so in our head about not reaching the goals that we've set ourselves, but you are on the road, and just the very fact that you're here watching and hopefully trying to improve yourself, you're doing better than 99% of the people out there.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Kaela, for this interview and sharing all
Thank
your
you.
wise words. You are amazingly wise for someone that's 25 years old. That's
Oh,
crazy.
thank you.
And
I'll take that.
and sharing all your amazing knowledge. So thank you. For anyone that is interested in next week's episode, in fact, no, I'm not going to tell you right now. I'm going to keep it a surprise.
Oh, secret.
Yeah, it's a secret.
Can't wait.
Yeah. But thanks so much, Kaela. Let's wrap this up. And thank you for watching episode 11 of WebFlail. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.